I just listened to a really good book by Rickson Gracie called Breathe. And he's a Brazilian jiu-jitsu master, and it's a fantastic book with a lot of parallels to trading. And he goes through a lot of really crazy stuff in his life, and it's a kind of a spiritual journey, and the guy is definitely a real artist in terms of a master of his craft, pulling from many other disciplines, deep breathing to get used to being comfortable in really uncomfortable positions, and just a lot of things that reminded me of being good at trading. So I highly recommend you listen to it. I think you really enjoy the stories, and I want to kind of highlight some of the things in the book. Coincidentally, I just did a 15-minute podcast on this exact topic, and it got deleted, so I'm a little frustrated right now, and this one's probably going to be shorter, but I'm going to try to bring the best of the last podcast into this, so give it a shot. The first thing, the overriding message of all this is surviving versus winning. And that's kind of the big message that he had was, if you survive long enough, you eventually figure out a way to win. It's not about running in there and getting really aggressive and trying to get jacked up and take big risk and throttle everything right away. It's about falling and rolling with flow and with a loose body and really learning to hang around for as long as you can. And when you do that, you find areas where you're strong or where your opponent's weak, and you can make your move. And I think with trading, we see that again and again too. I've been a pretty aggressive trader most of my career, and a lot of times I think I would have done a lot better, and I will do better in the future by being less aggressive. I think being able to shoot first and think second overall is a good skill, and it's better than not being willing to take risk. But a lot of times there's this second order thinking, and this idea of counter punching and waiting can be super valuable. And sometimes it's easier to do that when you're able to shoot first, and then you can kind of quickly reassess and go back and kind of wait for the next one. And because if you freeze and you don't do anything, that can be even worse than at all, because you don't want to take any risk. But just from him going through the book and talking about martial arts, it's amazing to me how much it related on that. So I think that's the real big message I would drive home to myself, if I could talk to myself years ago, would be to continue to play small ball, especially when it's busy. You're trading way smaller than you would like. And because of that, you end up trading larger than you would like and making a lot more money. Because when you're small, you feel things and you stay alive, and you can take a lot of mistakes. It doesn't matter. I always say, in the absence of too much size, there's really no stupid trade that matters that much. You can just say, oh, that was really dumb. I faded the trend. I did something that wasn't even it was a moderate trade or a trade that wasn't part of my plan, a C or D level trade, or whatever you want to say. And that stuff can just be shaken off when the size isn't too big. So when you start trading too big and making the mistakes, all the other emotions come in. And it could be the same in the martial art, where you're taking big risks and trying to put somebody down right away, and you open yourself up, or you hurt yourself because you're tense, you're not flowing. And I think that that's a really good mindset to have, one that we should all strive to have more. And the other thing that, so the second point he talks about is, they ask him about what's his plan for the fight. And he's like, well, how could I have a plan for something that's so unpredictable, and I don't know exactly how the match is going to unfold? Because you think you know what an opponent's going to do, or you have some preconceived ideas, and then they come with something totally different, and your plan goes out the window when you get punched in the face, like the Mike Tyson quote that he had. Everybody has a plan, and they get punched. And I think you can look at that when you have expectations for, we should rally today, or there's a Fed day, and I think this is going to happen, or that's going to happen. And oftentimes, what you get pigeonholed into thinking a certain way, and then you can't allow the market to show you what it wants to do and get on board with it. So there's a fine line between preparing and knowing what's a big surprise, and then also letting the market. Sometimes there's a market positioning issue where, you're prepared. Say there's a Fed event, and this just happened recently. There's usually always these fake moves before the real move. It happens a lot. So, if like when I trade the Fed and the S&Ps, I'm looking at the short end of the bond curve, the long end. I'm looking at key stocks to see if they're holding. And a lot of times there'll just be a move that I kind of understand why it's happening, but I just don't think it makes sense. So I don't really trade it, because I'm like, I don't get this. And then it seems to blow everybody out, and it comes back, and then it starts setting up the move that I thought made sense. And then I'm able to get on that second move. And if I get hurt in the first move, it's hard for me to catch the second move. It's also hard for me before the event to possibly anticipate that was going to happen. And that's kind of the surprise the market always throws at you. It's always doing things that you don't totally understand. And you can't predict. How about that? You can maybe understand it, but you can't predict it. And I think that's a big thing to understand is you can have a plan, but you can't always predict the way it will play out. I'm going to sneeze here, so give me a second. Excuse me, it's bad allergy season over here. So I want to go back to that I'm going to hammer that home again. So that's the biggest thing the market will do to us is it'll go up if we think it will, but it'll do it in a way that we are not able to get on board. So being humble and understanding that might happen and being willing to kind of let it play out sometimes in a way that you don't expect is very important. It's just like an open-mindedness that you have. It's like going into the fight thinking that the opponent's probably going to want to fight on their feet because they're better punching than you are, and you want to take it to the ground, but be open to a different outcome and then think about what you might do if that happens versus just going in dead set on how you want to do it. And I've always seen coaches in sports. There's the one side that says, this is what I'm going to do. I'm really good at it. Try to beat me. Okay, fine. And then there's the other side that says, I know what I'm good at, but if you give me an opportunity or a window to do something that I think I can succeed at because you leave an opening, I'm going to change my game plan a little bit and go for that, even though, to be less predictable. I'm not saying that either one is right or wrong, but sometimes you might choose one or you might choose the other. And I just try to stay open. And earlier in my career, I would get more closed off that way. And I think it set me back a little bit on some of the moments where I could have done better or could have maybe had less of a painful experience or something like that if I didn't have that closed-mindedness. So that's a point that I picked up from the book that was really good. The other thing is just the ability, and I don't know if it's the ability is the word, I'm trying to think of the right word here. I guess open-mindedness to learn from all different people who are artists and really good at their craft, and to pull things from everywhere that you see it and really apply that to trading, if that's your craft, and look at being precise in the most mundane details. For instance, he learned to breathe really deeply and control himself in very uncomfortable positions through world-class yoga practitioners. So when he was in chokeholds or uncomfortable positions, he could last a lot longer than anyone else and figure out a way to get out of it by not panicking and having the fight or flight take over. And I mean, that's a useful skill for everybody, I feel like. But even in trading, it's this stuff about surviving versus winning, and about hanging around and learning how to doing the boring stuff, managing your risk, studying where you entered and exited to be better. How can you be cleaner? When I used to plot my trades by hand, I'd always say to myself, at the end of the day, when you're plotting these trades, feel good about what you're doing. Feel like I'm proud of where I got in. Like I thought I was going to go up. So instead of buying and it was choppy, so I was buying near the bottom and not the top of the range every time. And maybe it didn't work, but at least I'm happy with where I was getting in. And then the next thing was was my overall logic and positioning correct? It went down first and then it went up. Okay, why did it do that? Well, there was a big round number and there was lots of stops that were probably there. So the market had to go down and take all those out, and then it went up. So next time I kind of waited for that. I'm like, I need to wait for it to get flushed out, and then it's probably going to go up because it's acting funny. Like I think it's going to go up, but it's acting weak right now and I don't really get it. And then you kind of can get caught up in that. And if you can start to learn how to think second order, but yes, there's too much. They like to flush out the stops or trade the volume. The market just likes to do that, especially leveraged positions and futures. So you'll see a lot of times where the areas like that will get taken out before the ultimate move happens. And you learn to spot that stuff and then maybe get in after, or just be more proficient. And if you're trading in stocks or in other things and trends that are bigger picture, sometimes they don't act that way. Sometimes stocks don't do that, but futures do. Everything's different. So you learn the finer the nuances of what you're doing by studying your mistakes and just being better about it that way, and having an open mind about how I can get better each time versus, versus just going in there with a closed mind, which is super easy to do, especially when you're doing well. And in the past, when I'm doing well, it's kind of like I go into take more risk mode, and oh, it's going to go up, I'm going to get in, I'm not going to worry about it. If it goes down a little bit, I'll buy more because I know I'm going to be right. And all of a sudden it's a disaster. And then I end up being flat out wrong and it goes down and then it's an ugly losing day. And when I'm kind of in a more humble spot that I'm in right now, especially after reading that book, it doesn't happen to me like that. It's really a choice mentally to not act like that because I don't know if I'm right for sure. So I'm going to put myself in a position where I think it's going up. Where can I get in, assuming I'm going to be wrong, knowing that if I am wrong, I'll be a little less wrong. And that's usually a really good spot. And that's usually under where I would put my stop. It's, okay, I'm putting my stop here. So is everybody else likely. What happens if it goes down through that and it can't go down anymore and comes back up? Maybe that's the spot then. Thinking that way instead of thinking about just, I'm going to be right. It's really easy when you're having confidence to say, I'm going to get in and I'm going to be right. You don't even consider where you're going to be wrong. Have to consider where you're going to be wrong as you get in, or else, shit hits the fan later. And it's easy when you're doing well to do a few times where you're right, you get in, you are right. And then all of a sudden the fifth time you're not. And then it really unravels for you. And then that can set off an entirely bad period of trading because you got used to being right and you forgot that sometimes you're not. And, there's the other side of things when it's going poorly over and over and you are doing the right things and it's maddening, but eventually it turns. And that's just, the way it is. It's always mutating and changing. It's just like the Brazilian jiu-jitsu stuff. Every opponent's different. The plans that they have might not be what you think. You might have to call on yourself to be intuitive. And sometimes like the biggest moments you have are intuitive moments where you do something that you didn't even know you could do because you're really in connection with all these principles of risk management and of waiting for the market. And when you do all that, you kind of lock yourself into the right spot and your training comes back and helps you, but it's not even a conscious thing sometimes. It's just the work, the cumulative effort that you've been putting in. So it's a great book. My last podcast is probably a little better than this one, but you know how it is. You write the whole paper and then Google erases the paper and you got to write it again. So it's tough. But anyways, I'm going to come back on and do another one a little bit later, maybe today or maybe tomorrow, but about something else. But definitely read the book if you're at all interested. And even the second half or the last quarter of it is especially good. He goes through a lot of the lessons he's learned.